Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Building Sustainability at Every Step, the Kitchen and Beyond. As we continue Kitchen and Bath Month for October, I want to thank Mila for generously sponsoring this month's webinar series. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing Brianna Ryan, Director of A&D Development at Mila. Brianna, please take it away.
Hello, my name is Brianna Ryan, and I am the Director of Architect and Designer Development for Mila USA. I want to thank you so much for spending part of your day with us during the NKBA webinar series. I am pleased to present our newest CEU course titled Building Sustainably at Every Step, the Kitchen and Beyond. I had the pleasure of debuting this CEU a couple of weeks ago out in Chicago for Design Chicago, and it was very well received by the audience. It provides a nice high-level overview of sustainability, and it kind of tunes into where our place is within that conversation on the kitchen and bath side. It has some nice conversation starters, some things to explore, different topics and whatnot. Quite honestly, we could probably spend a whole day. You could probably do a whole workshop, a week-long workshop on sustainability and incorporating more practices into our daily lives. But we will start here. And again, I'm very pleased to present this to you. So away we go. Besides being NKBA certified, this course is also accredited with AIA, IDCEC, as well as NARI. If you happen to hold dual certifications or multiple certifications, we're more than happy to assure that the credit gets reported to the correct agencies. So you'll just let us know and we'll be sure to get you a certificate. Okay, so our learning objectives for today. We are going to discuss the importance of sustainable action when it comes to creating a better, healthier environment for the future, especially when it comes to the home. Consider eco-friendly specification standards and design factors such as energy efficiency, durability, longevity, and others. Explore the most important eco-friendly elements in appliances and products to create a more sustainable home with less waste. And gain insights into sustainable and wellness-focused home design from the perspective of an energy-efficient expert. All right, part one, sustainability. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of the topics and points covered here will stay high level, but you'll see as the course develops that there is the specific piece on kitchen and bath design and where our role really sits. As I also said, you can really spend quite a lot of time on a number of these individual topics, but we'll do our best to keep it high level for the time being. All right, so starting from the start here with climate change. So it is certainly an understatement to say that human activities have accelerated the natural fluctuations in the Earth's climate over the course of the last several decades in particular. And as we know, every decade has been warmer than the last since the 1980s. And the trend somewhat seems that we're headed to get even warmer over time. And when we think about overall temperature on Earth, we have to consider greenhouse gases, or GHGs for short. Without greenhouse gases at all, and they are naturally occurring in a number of instances, without any GHGs being trapped within our ozone layer, the Earth itself would be -4 degrees Fahrenheit on average. That is pretty cold. So that would be obviously quite disruptive to life. It would be prohibitive of allowing certain animals, certain flora, fauna from growing and flourishing, and that would probably be us included. That would be really quite cold. So greenhouse gases do themselves, they're not terrible because they do provide insulation for us on planet Earth. However, when we get into the story of excessive amounts of greenhouse gases, those can cause the surface temperature to rise. And when we look at emissions, this is where we start to get into territory that needs to be explored and considered so that way our human impact is reduced. So common GHG emissions, they will include burning fossil fuels, deforestation, which is essentially like a filter that planet Earth has. When we do too much of the deforestation, we're essentially pulling away that filter layer, which is also not good. We have agriculture and livestock practices, whether it's sustainable farming or maybe not so sustainable farming. That's definitely something to consider as far as reduction is concerned for emissions. and then just overall industrial processes, manufacturing, distribution of goods and services, things of that nature. And when we consider the effects of climate change, we've got changing weather patterns. Some of that includes reduced ice and or snow cover and permafrost. We hear about glaciers that are shrinking. And then when that happens, when the glaciers start to melt, when it's warming up, the sea levels inevitably will rise. That will also increase the ocean acidity because when these glaciers start to melt, they might take bits of sediment down with them that changes the pH of the ocean at that point. So that can be disruptive to the various ecosystems that live beneath the sea. And then we have the potential for increased natural disasters. And we're kind of seeing that certainly across the US, where, as we recall, growing up, weather patterns have just changed over time. I'm based in New York, so here in the Northeast, winters definitely seem to be warmer. It's not that it's terribly warm, but there's definitely been a change as far as the amount of snowfall. Again, how cold it really gets and stays within wintertime, just as an example. And so when we jump ahead to the worst case scenario to kind of keep ourselves in check here, we have population growth, we have rising temperatures, potentially poor air quality, overfishing, and then water stress are going to affect billions of people without action right now. And it has to really be a collective action because I think we would all agree that we are in this together across the planet. And then this is a very interesting statistic, I thought. So when we look at the built environment, so really our business and beyond, 42% of annual global carbon dioxide emission come from the built environment. And if we can believe this, 3/4 of the infrastructure that will exist in 2050 has not yet been built. So there's a whole lot of construction and building improvements to the built environment that we haven't even seen yet. So it's interesting that if we kind of consider what our global kind of carbon footprint is, that is a high number. So it really just does behoove us to start thinking, if we're not already doing so already, as I'm sure a number of you already practice within your various professions, it's important for us all to consider this as kitchen and bath design professionals. Okay, so part two, we're going to move into green building. So impacting that built environment that we just discussed. Energy efficiency. So we want to create more energy efficient buildings with design elements such as high insulation, efficient HVAC systems, high performance windows, energy efficient appliances, and renewable energy sources. So these design elements will all contribute to a healthier interior and, again, a reduced overall carbon footprint when we really focus on efficiency. Energy Star, of course, we're all very familiar with that program. It's the standard that certifies products that deliver efficient performance and savings. And Energy Star also identifies energy efficient buildings, which use on average 35% less energy than other buildings do. So it's a really nice distinction to see, definitely when it comes to certain buildings in particular. So this is an interesting standard. I actually saw this on a recent trip to Berlin, the European Commission energy labels. So this is essentially a sliding scale. So that way you're really giving the customer, the end user, also the design professional that they'll likely be working with, kind of give them a sense of where a particular product falls in terms of the actual efficiency. The energy label, generally speaking, has strict standards for efficiency, but you have this scale from A to G that can really help you and your clients make the appropriate decision, the best decision for their particular application. And then talking about water efficiency here. So buildings use a significant amount of fresh water to operate, making water efficient appliances, plumbing, and fixtures very essential. And so we have water sense labels. Those of you that are on the plumbing side of things will certainly know quite a lot about this, I imagine. They will let us know how efficient a product is at saving water. And those items are certified to use 20% less water, save energy, but still perform the same as or even better than their regular models. And I feel like we have hit a point in our lives where we don't have to sacrifice functionality We don't have to sacrifice good design in the name of making something sustainable or making a more sustainably minded choice. We can kind of have it all at this point, and that's only going to continue to improve over time. And so when we look at construction materials, building materials, they contribute to 11% of global emissions, making sustainable material options very, very important. So when we are talking to our contractors, when we're talking to our builders, our vendors, we want to understand when possible, are there renewable or recycled materials that we can select or that we can work with? But really, at the end of the day, what does the best job of keeping things we want to keep things out of the landfill. That's really the best job that we can do as far as sustainability is concerned. So, to that end, we really want something that's durable and very long lasting. When we look at concrete, so we can actually adjust concrete. I know that they've gotten very sophisticated these days with the formulas to have less cement and more eco friendly aggregates to lower the overall carbon footprint, which is very interesting. When we look at steel, typically or historically, the actual manufacturing process of steel is very intense and it is very carbon intense, unfortunately. However, as time has moved on and we've evolved, we have recycled steel options, and those have 5 times less carbon than regular steel, so to speak. And when you look at that, this is a really great number. 88% of today's steel is recycled. So we're doing a really good job there. And again, durability, we're keeping something, again, out of the landfill. We're having less unnecessary material waste. But at that point, you definitely want to select products that are just designed and engineered to be longer lasting, things that are serviceable, things that you can go ahead and maintain over time. Because if we keep something, again, alive as long as possible, whatever type of product it might be, we're really doing our best there as far as sustainability is concerned. Reparability, again, as I just mentioned, ease of repair is a very important part of sustainability. So, just understanding how all of these components come together. And on our side of things, there's a lot of levels of complexity when it comes to appliances, when it comes to plumbing, really all facets of our industry. But improved reparability requirements say that replacement parts must be provided for 7 to 10 years, depending upon the product. So that's definitely something that you would want to check with your vendors on. As a lot of us say in the industry, you can't have sales without service. So it's always really good to have those conversations early on, understand, and again, ask your vendors, ask the questions, so that way they can give you the best information that they can. So then when we look at a circular economy, I will say Europe is much further along than we are in the US, although there are a number of initiatives that are going on now. What a circular economy does in theory, in concept, it prioritizes the reuse of products and materials to reduce waste and support natural regeneration. So we have this set of R strategies. We have reduce, reuse, repair, refurbish, repurpose, recycle, and recover. Some of those words are quite familiar to us. And then transforming from a linear to a circular economy reduces the need for new resources. So even some manufacturers are looking at essentially a cradle to cradle type certification. So let's say you have a particular kitchen or bathroom product. What happens to it when it really truly has reached the end of its life? So a lot of companies are starting to look at initiatives now where you can actually reduce those products down to their original components, their original makeup. So whatever materials, they can be melted down, they can be salvaged, they can be recycled in a really sustainable and healthy way. So that, I think we're definitely going to see a lot more on that to come in the US. And then circular manufacturing, for those of us that are on the manufacturing side, even if a product can be recycled, how does the manufacturing impact the environment? So that's always something that companies are looking at. We want to consider being energy efficient. So can we incorporate solar or geothermal powered energy sources, other types of clean energy? Can we use hybrid or electric vehicles for our fleets? That will lower overall carbon dioxide emissions during the actual transportation. And then international guidelines. So we have this one guideline in particular, ISO 14001. So that is a recognized standard set by the Environmental Management System, or EMS. And within there are proactive measures to minimize environmental impact and then comply with general sustainable objectives. LEED, of course, a number of us are very familiar with LEED and, kind of know a bit about its history, but in essence, in a nutshell, it's framework for the environmentally responsible design and operation of buildings. So we now have a version 5. The version 5 has actually placed zero carbon to its core. And as we know, leadership in energy and environmental design seeks to create an equitable, resilient, and safe built environment. AIA 2030. So there are, again, a lot of initiatives by a lot of different groups as far as reaching net zero carbon by 2050. 2030 is apparently a halfway point to track architect and designer professionals' progress when it comes to tools, support, data, and analysis that support sustainable action in building design. So again, this is certainly the movement of our time. That's another understatement from my side. And this will definitely be something for us to keep an eye on as well. Okay, so moving over to our kitchens, we're going to talk through whole home appliances and other specifications. So, refrigeration, when we talk about something in the industry we refer to as an energy depleting appliance, refrigerators, they're always on, right? They're always running in some capacity. Refrigerators typically take up to 13.7% of a home's energy usage, according to the Department of Energy. So, again, that's just because it's always plugged in, it's always running in order to keep our food cold. Energy Star certified refrigerators are about 9% more energy efficient. So, of course, we'll always want to steer our customers, our clients to choosing those. And some of the reasons for the energy efficiency include the compressor, how that compressor is engineered just to be a bit more sustainable in nature. It's going to depend upon manufacturers, but there are some compressors that don't necessarily ramp up in the same way. So they keep a tighter handle on temperature and humidity. And they'll just do a really nice job in an energy efficient way of holding food at the appropriate temperature. We've gotten really smart nowadays with better insulation and temperature control. And then we'll talk about this in a moment, but temperature control, as long as you can manage that and manage your humidity, you're going to keep food fresher for longer. And so hopefully that will cut down on environmental waste when it comes to the contents of our refrigerators and freezers. And then efficient defrosting technology. I remember growing up, we had a freezer in the basement, and it was old school with the exposed coils in the back. And then I don't know if it was once a year or twice a year, we'd have to empty the contents, place them in a cooler. You'd have to drag the freezer outside. We would kind of hose it down. We would get all of the ice off of it. We would defrost the freezers the old-fashioned way. That is virtually not a thing anymore, especially if you're working with any premium or luxury brands. We've gotten really efficient now with the defrosting technology, which is essentially happening in a more passive way over time. So our refrigeration size, most energy efficient models are between 16 and 20 cubic feet, which by our standards is suitable at least for a family of 4. Lower GWP refrigerant. There was actually a changeover in refrigerant type a number of years ago to one that is a lot more sustainable, the actual coolant itself. And then fewer doors. So, generally speaking, but again, if you're buying a trusted quality brand, I don't think this is necessarily as impactful, but theoretically, physics would dictate that if you have fewer doors, you reduce the risk of air leakage and lower the risk of wasting energy because I guess by nature you just have less seams. However, again, if you know your manufacturers, you're familiar with the product, and you've worked with your local experience center, if possible, you should be confident that you're buying a quality product because it will certainly last. And again, food storage. America, we are just notoriously not good when it comes to food waste. We are the worst offender by many, many points, unfortunately, across the globe. So I think now we would all agree that if you think about maybe 10, 15 years ago when we're working with clients, I think the built-in, integrated, and counter depth refrigeration, those conversations were, I think, not as well received by the general public. But I think now people are starting to understand that, oh, okay, I don't necessarily need a refrigerator that is so large. I can go ahead and work with something that is maybe a smaller footprint. Maybe I'm putting together different pieces. So I have a freezer, I have perhaps some drawers that I can go ahead and convert. So I think we've gotten to a point where we realize we see that we don't necessarily need all of this space. I remember years ago working with certain customers, they would look at an integrated fridge and think, oh my goodness, can I fit a carton of eggs in there? Yes, absolutely you can. They can fit quite a lot. Again, 16 to 20 cubic feet is perfectly suitable for a family of four. And it'll just encourage greater turnover of produce, of just really everything that you're storing in your fridge. So that way things don't slip into the back and we forget about them. And then ultimately, unfortunately, they wind up expiring. So again, some of these features that have been incorporated by a number of manufacturers, we have refrigerator drawers. So those can sometimes, depending upon the type of drawer that it is, you're likely going to be able to change the humidity. You'll be able to change the temperature in some cases. So that way you have flex zones. Those have become popular. That energy efficient freezer that we were just discussing, and the LED lighting. So we can really see what is going on in the refrigerator. So that way, again, that's hopefully going to help us cut down on food waste. Furthermore, if you remember kind of old school where we would have the incandescent light bulbs within refrigerators and it would actually give off heat, of course. Those are really a thing of the past, as we know, and the LED lighting runs nice and cool, so it's not contributing to a warmer environment periodically when accessing the refrigerator. And by and large, the refrigerator is one of the most, if not the most, open door in the home, so that's very important. Then when we look at our ovens and cooktops, so there is the age-old debate between gas and electric. And when we say electric, we don't necessarily mean electric. That could also mean induction, which we'll talk about in a moment, which is powered by electricity. It's very circumstantial. It's going to be very dependent upon what your client wants, but also to whatever service is available in the area. As I know, a number of us are aware, a lot of municipalities, some states are really leading the charge to move away from gas, very simply put, and then switch over to electric. But, that might be prohibitive in some cases. So it's a circumstantial decision that you obviously will work out with your client, but we have to somehow balance cost, maintenance, the heat distribution, so speed, consistency, and then just general energy efficiency. So when we talk about ranges, right? So California is phasing out gas appliances in new projects. There are other cities that are doing that as well, definitely some here in the Northeast. They're phasing out gas appliances in new projects to prioritize energy efficiency, again, moving to electric. I recall reading an article in the New York Times a number of years ago. I want to say it was about 6 or 7 years ago, where there was a whole feature on the health risks that are associated with gas, because I guess when you think about it, you are burning a fossil fuel in your home when you are running your gas cooktops and your gas ovens. However, one could certainly make the argument that if you have adequate ventilation over your gas cooktops, ranges, etc., that is going to become far less of a consideration. Ventilation should always be switched on at least several minutes before cooking begins, before those burners go on, just so that way you can establish an airflow and a pattern of movement. So that way, when you do turn on the burners and somebody does start to cook on their gas cooktop, there's already that established airflow. So it's going to be less of an issue overall. So then looking at induction cooking, I remember the first time that I used an induction cooktop and I just made something as simple as scrambled eggs. And I was completely sold immediately just because it is so incredibly efficient and even, perfectly even end to end across your cookware. So induction works by way of electromagnetism. And so it's a type of electric cooking that transfers currents from the glass surface directly into the cookware. So in each cooking zone, there is an electromagnet, and that actually creates a direct bond with the cookware. So that way it's not a radiant technology that you would see in traditional electric, where we're essentially waiting for the energy to eventually wind up in the cookware. In this particular case, your cookware becomes the primary source of heat. So super, super efficient. Gas cooking, there is a lot of waste just because it goes to heat up your kitchen. I think we really notice this much more so in the summer than the colder months. Gas cooking can waste close to 70% of energy. It'll depend on manufacturer. There are some that do, a really good job, whereas induction only wastes about 15%. And that 15% is just some residual heat that is trapped in the transfer in the tempered glass surface. However, induction does require a 220 line. So again, sometimes that can be prohibitive. It really depends. But yeah, you'll obviously work that out with your client as well as the other folks that are working on the job. So induction is really fast. That is another understatement. You can boil water very, very quickly, in typically with a more responsive technology overall. So you, depending upon the manufacturer, you'll have different types of either a touchpad or a trackpad. But it really gives you that precise, even heating. It's also great for living in place because it doesn't kick off as much heat as, let's say, a gas cooktop would. It's great for homes that have pets, that have children, just because it's really considered one of the safest ways of cooking, one of the safest cooking technologies. Safety here again, so the burner does not get hot unless there is a pot on top of it, which is really great. So if I were working, let's say, on this pot on the left-hand side, if I were to very carefully place my hand here, I might feel a little bit of warmth from residual heat being trapped in the glass, but it's not going to be hot as would, let's say, an electric surface. So we don't have potentially harmful carbon emissions with induction because, again, it's all electric. They use about 50% less energy in terms of ventilation as well. So, ventilation does two things, right? It keeps the air clean, but it also mitigates heat. So, a lot of times you can reduce the amount of CFMs on your ventilation, which can be helpful if you are in a municipality where the inspection is really strict. Um, this will help you reduce that overall amount of ventilation required. And then onto dishwashers here. So dishwashers are very efficient these days. They actually save a lot of water when it comes to hand washing. And sometimes that is hard for our consumers to wrap their heads around, but you use on average almost 10 times more water when you are hand washing dishes versus running the dishwasher, if we can believe that. So a lot of manufacturers will have like a half load or a half cycle or an economy wash. Those will use about 8.4 liters of water. They just require less energy overall. And given the way that these machines are insulated these days, the heat that is used in the hot water wash cycle a lot of times will remain trapped within the unit. And then that heat is then recycled to assist with drying. Hot water line connection reduces electricity consumption by up to 35%, run times by up to 10%. A lot of times they don't use very much electricity at all for one particular load. And again, as I just mentioned, some manufacturers have a half load or a more abbreviated cycle that can also help us with our sustainability efforts. But yeah, that's a big statistic, a big changeover. So definitely, please utilize your dishwashers and we'll spread the message to our clients. And then laundry. So Energy Star certified washers use about 25% less energy, 33% less water compared to standard washing machines. And front loaders are notoriously extremely efficient and largely favored nowadays over, let's say, a top loader. You just get greater efficiency there, especially with a direct drive motor. Then we have water efficient fixtures. So we have our tapware and such. And of course, our bathroom fixtures. So those include our sinks, our toilets, shower heads, faucets. We always want to be specifying something that uses less water, but brings in as well high pressure technology. As I mentioned just a bit ago, that we don't have to sacrifice form and function force in the name of sustainability. You can really have it all. But again, those are the conversations that we all need to be having with our vendors, with our suppliers, and tradespeople. So, zooming out a bit, so when we talk about whole home sustainability, we are looking at HVAC, we're looking at insulation, we're looking at windows, lighting, flooring, all of those key components coming together to give us a really beautiful, sustainable home. So, when we think about HVAC, the HVAC systems account for about half of a typical home's energy usage. That's a lot. And again, this is according to the US Department of Energy. So again, talk to your HVAC specialists and see what is the latest and greatest technology on the market that you can specify. We always want to go for Energy Star certified products when possible. We want to understand what the maintenance schedule is so that way we are keeping up performance. And that's very critical to the proper functioning of the machines. And then we want to prioritize environmentally friendly refrigerants, which I believe nowadays, by and large, are utilized by most, if not all. But again, just ask the questions of your specialists. Then looking at insulation, so some factors to consider here. Greater thermal insulation values. We want to look at reduced and non toxic and no VOCs. There are a number of options on the market nowadays. Some of them use recycled content, which is really great. The low embodied energy and overall GHG emissions during the manufacturing process, because as I understand it, just again, high level statement, historically it was a fairly noxious manufacturing process, but that has significantly improved over time and it's only going to continue to grow. We want to think about sustainable material sourcing and end of life recycling or disposal options for the insulation when a remodel is happening. How can we recycle it or dispose of it in the best way possible? Windows as well. I live in a home that was built in 1967, and we have some clerestory windows. And when we were able to seal those up because there was clearly an air breach, the house became so much warmer in the middle of February for sure. So the frame type there can impact thermal resistance and impact your overall energy. So again, talking to your specialists in terms of window installation and repair and maintenance, considering glazing versus replacement of the entire glass, gas fills, so filling that space between the double panes, making sure that we have spacers so that way things are kept nice and tight, understanding different window operations, how they open, how they tilt, etc. And then whatever ratings are available for that particular manufacturer, just sort of seeing where they fall in terms of the landscape. And then lighting and flooring here. So LED lights, which have also become quite sophisticated over time. Putting things on dimmers and timers can really help prevent excess energy consumption. And for flooring, we want to make decisions, we want to make choices that are very durable, renewable in some cases, and really focused on longevity to be more eco-friendly. So, of course, we want to specify things that do well in high traffic environments. We want really dense quality materials on our floors. Perhaps they came from some sort of renewable source. Perhaps the floors lived another life prior to that application because it's made of some other material or things of that nature. But we definitely want to think about that because flooring, depending upon the size of the home, depending upon the size of the room, it's a lot of square footage for sure. So we want to make just, again, really prudent and quality choices for our clients. And they're going to look to us even more than they are probably now to really be educated on this. And again, it's really about knowing your vendors and knowing your suppliers and being able to have those conversations with your various representatives. When we think about heat pump technology in terms of a clothes dryer, they're very interesting. They use 30% less energy on average, so that makes them really efficient. A lot of times it's a closed loop system, so that means that they are ventless. A lot of times, too, they will do a nicer, more gentle job of drying our fabrics and garments because they're not getting as heated up as they would in, let's say, a traditional dryer. A lot of times, and I think we're something of an offender of that in this country for sure, is that a lot of times we're roasting our clothes on high temperatures in the dryer. Now, are there instances where it certainly calls for that? Yes, absolutely. Especially if sanitization is of particular concern in a home, we want to make sure that we're doing the best job by the fabrics, but also for our unique situations. However, if it's our daily clothing, you want to choose manufacturers that are really giving you holistic options really for clothes care. So that's definitely something to consider and be informed on. When we think about eco drying programs within these dryers, lower energy consumption, also faster drying times. But we want these machines to take really good care of our clothing and our various fabrics because that too also has a sustainability message that we spend a lot of money on our clothing and sheets and towels and all kinds of things. So we want to make sure that those pieces last as long as possible and they themselves don't wind up in a landfill sooner than they needed to. And then looking ahead to sustainable homes of the future, what do these look like? So here's a quote from Matt Reisinger, who is a single family home builder. He's based in Texas. He says here that net zero capable or ready home means build the infrastructure to be energy efficient first. So, in order for this piece to really work well, we have to have an energy efficient infrastructure. And then we are essentially coming in later on to dress the set in a wide set of sustainable materials, the interior components as we've just covered. But it's really about laying the groundwork and that infrastructure for a truly sustainable home. And then, so a review of everything that we have covered, these high level topics. So, we talked about insulation and really making sustainable choices and talking to our builders and professionals as far as understanding what the market landscape looks like and what choices are going to be the most eco friendly. We talked about air sealing. We talked about high performance windows and doors and how much of an impact that they have when it comes to sustainability and just really, providing quality products for the home that will last over time. We talked a bit about efficient heating and cooling systems, and again, just how important it is to work with your HVAC professionals as far as just understanding, again, laying that infrastructure, as Matt Reisinger had just shared. Understanding energy efficient appliances and lighting, that is incredibly important to the sustainability story. And then smart home technology, how that can help us be more sustainable as time goes on. And that certainly looks like a very beautiful, sustainable home to me, if I do say so. So I think we will leave it here and we can go ahead and yield to questions. I want to thank you so very much for your time and consideration on the Building Sustainably at Every Step CEU. And with that, yes, we can move to questions. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's presentation. I just want to say thank you so much to you, Brianna, for your informative presentation today. We do have a few questions from the audience, so I'm going to go ahead and dive right in here. So you mentioned in your presentation ISO 14001 midway through your presentation, which is a recognized standard set by the Environmental Management System. So we're wondering, how can designers leverage this framework to better evaluate whether a material or product is genuinely eco-friendly versus just marketed as green?
Yeah, for sure. So the ISO 14001, the framework itself is really meant to emphasize a life cycle perspective. So it wants to encourage designers to just assess overall environmental impacts from start to finish, from kind of concept to completion for the product. So we can ask questions like, how was the material sourced? What emissions or waste are generated during the actual production? Because again, it's looking at the entire life cycle of the product itself. You can also ask some of these questions of your suppliers in turn too. So
great. Thank you so much. We have a new question coming in from Carla. She's wondering your opinion on residential ice makers and if they are energy efficient, wondering if they should run 24 hours.
So they kind of have to, because they're going to be plugged in at all times anyhow. So again, just work with your manufacturers. That's really the best thing that you can do is, and I know sometimes I know for sure that studies show that some designers, probably all of you, spend at least 30% of your days working on specifying product, which is quite a lot, right? So it might be an extra step or two of research, but make sure that you're pulling all of the documents, perhaps going into installation instructions, user guides, et cetera, just to really get the full picture beyond a product data sheet or a specification sheet. They do use energy, but generally speaking, if it has that Energy Star label, I think you're okay. I mean, in my house, we do happen to go through quite a lot of ice. We're the type that drinks iced coffee even in February. So it's just one of those things. And it is a nice piece to have if somebody does a lot of entertaining. So I certainly wouldn't shy away from specifying ice makers. But again, just ask the questions. They work on the 110 energy line. So it's not like it's a high draw. Generally speaking, I believe the amperage rates are pretty low too. But again, you'll just want to double check with your manufacturers, which is really kind of, I think, one major tenet of this CEU is to ask those questions.
Great. Awesome. Our third question is, what do you see as the biggest misconception among designers or clients when it comes to sustainable building practices?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's that we can't have it all, and we absolutely can at this stage of life. You don't have to sacrifice aesthetics in any capacity in order to achieve a sustainable kitchen design, sustainable bathroom design. I think that there's also the misconception that it's just going to be more expensive, that sustainability will carry a larger price tag. And perhaps that was the case in some product sets years ago. But again, because things have evolved and they're starting to evolve now even more quickly, prices have come down, aesthetics have gone up, and sustainable manufacturing processes, especially in our industry, are only going to continue to get better. So I think you can have it all with sustainability. And I still think that there is that sort of thinking that, oh, it's not going to look as sleek and as minimal, and I'm not going to be able to achieve the design. Again, it might require a bit more research, so there is a bit more time investment on our side, but that's where your vendors come in. We're here to help during that process.
Great. Awesome. We have a question in from Karen. She's wondering, are multifunctional appliances more energy efficient, or is that something that's more so a space saver?
That's a really good question. I would say definitely we lead with that space saving conversation, I would say. So, for example, if I, look at a product that Miele offers, as far as like a 48-inch professional range, it's really designed to be a cooking suite where you can have a combination oven. You can also have a primary oven. You've got multiple burners, a warming drawer. You've got all kinds of things that are built into there. However, again, it can also be so yes, you're being efficient in terms of the space, but you can also be at the same time efficient with energy usage, because you're achieving more within one item that's carrying theoretically one line of electricity, perhaps one line of gas. So it's not like you're managing multiple, say sets of service for electrical appliances, which by code have to be plugged in to separate circuits. So yes, you can achieve greater efficiency with the combination products.
Great. Awesome. How would you define truly sustainable design in the context of today's residential projects?
That's a really, really good question. What would I say here? I would say that beyond just the actual specification of the product, the application of the product, I think we have to be future thinking about what's going to happen to all of these pieces when they, again, truly reach the end of their life cycle, or maybe they haven't, but we have a client that just wants to remodel the space for whatever their needs might be. So I think we have to really kind of look into the future. It's almost like a past, present, and future sort of assessment that we're doing in the moment when it comes to our clients' designs. I think if we were to take it to the next level, thinking about how we can kind of incorporate ourselves to be just a little bit more in tune with our environment. So perhaps there's the introduction of like biophilic design, perhaps there's the addition of that. So you're getting at different air, let's say an air quality piece, if you were to add a green wall, or, an assortment of plants and greenery within a particular space. So I think you can go all over the place with that for sure. But I would say at its core, definitely environmental impact minimization, as the CEU covered. But then again, also looking to the future about what might happen to these products, and just letting that sort of guide us. But we're starting to hear more and more about that biophilic design. So if we can kind of bring ourselves closer, bring our clients closer to the planet, and just to be more in tune, I think that's truly sustainable design as well.
Awesome. Awesome. We have one last question from Jessica. She's wondering, are there any materials that attendees today should be aware of that are less sustainable, such as cabinet boxes, countertop materials, etc.?
I can't say for certain, no, because it's so incredibly circumstantial. You really have to, unfortunately, assess. There's not really a guide, and that's what makes our jobs a bit more difficult and a bit more time consuming as far as that research is concerned. And you know what? At the end of the day, we're all going to do the very best that we can, right? And it's a learning process. It's a learning curve. But I think that here, the strength of our community really shines, because we can contact one another. That is a hallmark of the kitchen and bath industry, is our community. So definitely reach out, again, ask those questions, and take the time to learn and try to implement them. But as far as any specific products. Can't say for certain, because if there's a way to repurpose it, then that's great too. Then that makes it inherently more sustainable, because you're picking out a way to recycle it so far. But there's not necessarily a particular piece. Of course, if you know for sure that something has a VOC attached to it, and perhaps it doesn't contribute to healthy air quality, and that beyond the shadow of a doubt, of course you're going to be removing that from the space. But it's hard. You have to assess it in each unique circumstance.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much. Before we end today, do you have any other final thoughts for our audience?
Any final thoughts? Again, leaning on the community, as I just said, we're all in this together at the end of the day. So we're, me working on the vendor side, my team working on the vendor side, we're here to be your resource. As far as appliances are concerned in the major cities, definitely please reach out to my team if you have any questions at all regarding specifying Miele appliances. We are an incredibly sustainable brand, and very proud to announce that. We have to lean on each other, because you saw those statistics as far as the built environment is concerned. This is real for sure. So there's a lot of responsibility on our shoulders, but I think that as time will evolve and we continue having education sessions such as this is how we can all learn together. So big thanks to the NKBA for highlighting this.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Brianna, for sharing your expertise with us today. And thank you for Miele for generously sponsoring this month's webinar series. I just wanted to let everybody know you will expect a thank you email in your inbox tomorrow afternoon for this webinar. So until next time, have a great day. Thank you, everyone.
Take care, everyone. Bye.